How much of an impact does making one strawberry have on climate change? That's what we're here to talk about today. My name is Eugene and this is Verdant Growth. Have you ever thought about how much greenhouse gas emissions there would be from the production of one strawberry? Probably not. So that was what I wanted to look into a little bit. I wanted to think about where are all the places the production of one strawberry could emit greenhouse gases. So let's set the stage. Let's say that you live in New York City. Let's say you live in a nice apartment in New York City. There's lots of restaurants around, lots of places to eat. And let's say you just bought one strawberry. Well, maybe not one strawberry, maybe you bought one pack of strawberries. Now, to get those strawberries to you, those strawberries had a carbon footprint. CO2 emissions that they produced all along the way until they got into your hands. If you're buying strawberries in New York City, those strawberries probably came from California. That would be because California produces most of the strawberries in the United States. And on a strawberry farm in California, there was a farmer, and that farmer probably used a series of equipment to produce that strawberry. They first probably used a tractor that probably burned gasoline and produced carbon to plow the fields. They then probably used another machine to sow the seeds. Then they probably had a pump pumping some water to water the strawberries. So each of those steps produces CO2 along the way. When those strawberries get picked, they probably get picked and put onto a truck, which probably burns gasoline and produces CO2 emissions. That truck brings the strawberries from the field to a packaging center. Then, in the packaging center, they use electricity to power the lights and to power the machines to package the strawberries. Next, the strawberries are all packaged into probably plastic containers, which also have a carbon footprint of their own. Those packaged strawberries get put onto a bigger truck where they are now shipped across the states. All the while, that truck also burns gasoline, producing CO2 emissions. Eventually, those strawberries are going to make it to New York. Again, they are packaged and distributed for various different supermarkets throughout New York. Keep in mind that that packaging center is also burning fossil fuels to keep the electricity on, to keep the equipment running. And then, from that distribution center, all of those strawberries are placed onto smaller trucks where they're shipped to every individual supermarket throughout the city. So now after coming all that way across the states and burning carbon that whole way, they've gotten to that distribution center, they've come out of the distribution center, and they are getting sent to the supermarkets. Keep in mind, this whole time, those strawberries can't just be kept at room temperature. That means that for every truck that they've been on along the way, those were probably refrigerated trucks. They take a lot of energy, and those produce a lot of carbon just to keep those strawberries cold. Now, your strawberries are at the supermarket, and again, that supermarket is probably burning carbon. It needs to keep the lights on, it needs to keep the machines running, it needs to keep all those refrigerators running, it needs to keep the place air conditioned. So they're burning fossil fuels too, just to store those strawberries at the supermarket. Now, if you're like most people in America, you don't really walk or ride bikes to get to places too often. You probably ride a car or some other form of public transportation to get from your front door to the supermarket. So guess what? You burn carbon that whole way, unless you have an electric car, in which case most electric cars also get charged at home, and most homes are still powered by fossil fuels. So even if you have an electric car or an electric bike or an electric scooter, you're probably still relying on fossil fuels to get your energy. So you've now burned carbon to get from your house to the supermarket. You buy that pack of strawberries, you check out, and guess what? You gotta burn fossil fuels one more time. You gotta emit more carbon to get from the supermarket back to your house. What do you do when you get to your house? Well, you want to keep those strawberries for as long as you can. So what do? You put them in the refrigerator, right? And guess what? It's one of the biggest electricity eaters in your house. So that means anything that is eating a lot of electricity is emitting a lot of carbon. It's emitting a lot of fossil fuel emissions. So now those strawberries are sitting in your fridge, and let's just say you were out a lot this week, you went to a lot of restaurants, you never really got around to eating those strawberries, and you actually forgot about them. And then one day you go to open your fridge and they're all rotten. So you throw them in the trash can. After all that time of just burning carbon to keep those strawberries in your refrigerator, they just go right to the trash. About 30 to 40% of all food that we produce gets thrown away. So that means we can assume that even if you don't throw away your strawberries, about 30 to 40% of the strawberries that we made did get thrown away. So now, these strawberries that were emitting carbon dioxide this entire way as they traveled from California to New York, to the supermarket, to your house, to the garbage can, are now producing methane, a greenhouse gas that is 86 times worse for the climate than carbon dioxide is. That is a lot of greenhouse gas emissions for just one pack of strawberries. From a carbon emission standpoint, it would have just been a lot better for that farmer to take 30 to 40% of those strawberries and just throw them into a garbage can right after he made them. At least in that case, those strawberries didn't burn all that carbon as they came across the country and then sat in a supermarket and then sat in your refrigerator. So, why is this important? Why do we care about this at all? It's a big deal because it's not just strawberries that this happens for. This is occurring for every single type of vegetable, fruit, or any item in the supermarket at all for that matter. Every single item that you can pull off of the shelf in a supermarket came from somewhere. It had to produce carbon to get from wherever it was made to get to the supermarket and then from there to your house. It added to climate change. It added to climate change when it was made. It added to climate change as it moved across the country to wherever you bought it from. It produced carbon as it sat there on the shelf. Every step along the way, everything makes carbon, which adds to climate change. So what can we do? What are things that we can change in our lives to reduce that impact that we have, that our foods have on the environment? Number 1, shop smart. Don't buy things you don't need. Only buy things that you are absolutely going to eat. Number 2, buy as much locally sourced food as you can. Go to your local farmer's market. It's cheaper, it usually has way less packaging than things that you buy at the supermarket, and it hasn't been shipped nearly as far as the foods at the supermarket have. Or start a garden at home. Every single garden that you can make on your rooftop or in your backyard is going to help climate change. The smartest thing that we can do for the environment is to produce food as close as possible to the place that we consume it. Number 3, keep mental notes or real notes of everything that you throw away. If you remember all of the food that you're throwing away at home, the next time you're at the supermarket, you can remember, most of the time I end up just throwing away my loaf of bread. I probably just shouldn't buy so much bread in the first place. It'll save you money and it'll reduce your climate impact. Number 4, eat foods from oldest to newest. Prioritize the oldest things in your refrigerator. Anything that you've had for the longest amount of time should be brought to the front of the refrigerator so that every time you open it, the first thing you see is the oldest thing in the fridge. Number 5, learn how to store your food properly. Properly stored foods last much longer. A quick Google search can help you out a lot here, but things like lettuce can last a lot longer if you were to just put them in a little bit of water. Some foods also last a lot longer when you store them in airtight containers. Getting some airtight containers is another way that you can store many foods properly to keep them for a lot longer. Number 6, as much as you can, repurpose everything. When I say repurpose, I'm not just talking about the containers and the packaging that your food comes in. I'm talking about doing things like turning your veggie scraps into veggie stock, turning your aging fruits into jams, turning stale breads into things like bread pudding or croutons. There are so many ways that you can eat leftovers. Find a good book on turning table scraps into your next meal. This is going to help you cut down a lot on your kitchen waste. That also reduces your methane from rotting foods. So, what are some of you guys' tips from your kitchen? Do you have any tips to help me with my kitchen on making my kitchen a little bit more environmentally friendly? Let me know down in the comments below. What do you do to keep your veggies lasting longer? How do you remind yourself what to eat first? What's your favorite way to buy locally sourced foods? So that's it for me, guys. I hope that information was helpful for you. It was really, really helpful for me in changing the way that I look at every single item I see in the supermarket. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button down below. I would really, 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 really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Eugene and Verdant Growth, out. So now, those strawberries are sitting in your fridge, and let's just say you were out a lot this week, you went to a lot of restaurants, you never really got around to eating those strawberries, and you actually forgot about them. They ended up sitting at the back of your fridge, you didn't even remember that they were there for about 2 weeks, and then one day you go to open your fridge and there they are. There are those strawberries with that mold on them, and they're all bad, and I can't even make smoothies with these things anymore. God, they're all rotten. So you throw them in the trash can.